We'll begin episode 3 in just a minute, but first of all, let's go back to part 2. Thanks to Char the blacksmith, Lionel's sword has been reforged, and better than that, now that Lionel's got his reforged sword back, he defeated Grun the Destroyer. Now that Char the blacksmith became the next friend on the Thundercats friends list, but there's still a problem on New Thundera, so part 3 begins where part 2 leaves off. Now remember back in part 2, we talked about the Thunderian refugees and how the Thundercats got the transmission and got the good news. So in Mumm-ra's tomb chamber of the Black Pyramid, the first thing we see was Mumm-ra waking up from his sleep in the sarcophagus, and he met up with his companion, Mahmut. And he displayed a case that him trying to seduce, or should we say persuade Jagara to eliminate the Thundercats from New Thundera, and it just wore him out. He even ensures his canine pal not to worry about it because thanks to his sarcophagus it recharged him. So they have something to celebrate, so they go to the sarcophagus to have a look about what's going on and how the progress is doing. But unfortunately for Mumm-ra, by the time he looked in his cauldron, he was in shock. He saw that the body of the lair is done, but all is left to do is just finish the rest of the lair by attaching the head of the lair. He was in shock. He couldn't believe it. Mumm-ra saw that the lair is almost finished. He said, "What? The lair is almost done?" Mumm-ra is now all upset because he just pleaded a case to say that Lionel and his friends should have been flung from the Valley of the Stone Giants and that the lair itself should have been disintegrated and etc. What angers Mumm-ra even more is that he couldn't help but ask himself how did his plan go wrong. Now he has a suspicious thought that Jagara must have repaired the gyroscope's controls by now. So, what Mumm-ra told his canine pal that they must go to investigate. Before heading off, Mumm-ra told his canine pal that this time Jagara has a choice. Either she does what he said to do or pay the price. Meanwhile, at the construction of the new castle, which is almost finished, and of course at the Valley of the Stone Giants. So good news for the Thundercats now that the new meeting room is finished. Everybody was there. We have Snarf, his nephew, Lionel, Chitara, Panthro, Linkso, Bengali, and the Thunder Kittens. So you're probably wondering why is Lionel called everyone for a meeting? Well, he wanted to know from Linkso if there was progress going on New Thundera so far. Well, according to Linkso, he said that all we know is that according to Snarfer, he received the transmission from the Thunderian refugees. Now remember, we mentioned it back in part 2. So flashback, we go back 3 seasons ago when the planet Thundera exploded. According to Linkso, what he said in the present scene, he said that they're not the only ones who got out of there, so he must have suspected that the refugees got out too. So back in the present! Also, according to Linkso, he has a suspicious thought. He said if the refugees must learn to survive as well as the Thundercats did, then the refugees knew as well as they knew. Then Linkso said, wait, there's more. When the planet Thundera reforged itself at the time, and that's why the planet itself that we're on right now is called New Thundera, and that explains why the refugees are trying to find their way back. Well, Lionel has his turn to not only agree with Linkso, but he said there's a problem. The transmission, according to what he heard, said that the refugees are landing somewhere on the churning rocks. Then Panthro has his turn to not only agree with Lionel, but he said that they were captured by Two-Time because he heard the exact same transmission as Lionel did back in part 2. The Thunderkins are really confused. They were asking, huh? Who? What is Toon Time anyway? So Chitara has her turn to tell the Thunderkins that she's not sure. But because back in part 2 when she and Lionel were there at the Churning Rocks, she didn't see any refugees anywhere. But other than that, it was before Chitara pleaded her case. She just said that she and Lionel will find out about it. But what's strange about it, when it was Lionel's turn to plead his case, he didn't know anyone but of Two Time. But he was about to find out as well as Chitara did. Speaking of Dome Down, here it is now, and luckily it found a place to land. And luckily it did. Oh, we're about to meet Tor and his family in just a minute, so here they are, and they're being imprisoned, just as the Thundercats in the meeting room at the New Lair said. So here comes Two Time after he heard the cries of the Thunderian refugees, Tor and his family, saying, "Get us out of here, we're thirsty," and etc. So what Two Time did is that he said, "Silence, or this will be your last day." But we're just poor Thunderian refugees. All we're doing is trying to get back to our home so we can rebuild our lives, Tor said to Two Time. But Two Time just dismissed that claim and told Tor and his family that they are his prisoners. Two Time also told Tor and his family that they'll be his slaves, especially in that spaceship of his called the Dome Down. Then Tor has his turn to plead a case to Two Time to say there's no way you're keeping us here. So Two Time asked Tor, "Is that so?" So what Two Time did is that he pressed a button on his head. And what the Thunderians did after Two Time pressed the button on his head is that they levitated and was upside down on their heads. So Two Time told Tor and his family, "There's no way you're getting out of here, but if you submit, I'll let you walk again," he said. "But if you choose to resist, you'll be spending the rest of your lives on your heads." So once the Thunderians are no longer upside down on their heads and landed on the ground, that's when Two Time just told the Thunderians, "The choice is yours. It's your decision." So meanwhile, back at the Valley of the Stone Giants at the New Liar's construction site, after the meeting had ended from the meeting room, that's when Lionel suggested that they should split up to find the refugees, and that would be the job for Link, Soul, Bengali, and Chitara. The three Thundercats agreed and then headed off. Lionel couldn't help but have a thought in his head. Why did New Thundera suddenly reemerge itself, and then why? He just couldn't figure it out. And then Panthro shows up. He not only agrees with Lionel, but he says that even if we knew, we would know the cause of those gravity changes and those earthquakes by now. Well, Lionel not only agrees with Panthro, but he said there's only one problem, how they're going to find out. Well, Panthro said that there's some good news. He said that himself and the Thunderkins are working on that problem right this minute. So after Lionel agrees to follow Panther and the Thunder Kittens, that's when Wily Kid just told Lionel that while Lionel's been running around New Thundera getting himself in trouble, herself, her brother, and Panthro were busy building the sixth vehicle on the list, which is called the Whisker. Lionel was in awe. He's never seen a vehicle like it before, so Panther was more than happy to explain to Lionel how the whisker works. He says it's a tracking vehicle, but better than that, these whiskers are the probes. It could track anything, he said. Then Pedro said that what's even more better is that not only it will track down Thunderian, but it could tell us what happened and where those quakes are coming from and why. "Well, what are we waiting for?" Lionel said. "Let's go." You could tell that Lionel was very impressed. So after the whiskers all set, it's ready to go. So after that, the four Thundercats, the Thunderkittens, Panther, and Lionel head off. Meanwhile, the churning rocks in the Thunderstrike, we have Chitara, Big Galley, and Linkso. Now, Linkso just told them the good news that they should be arriving there at any moment. Of course, Linkso just told Bengali and Chitara even more good news that in no time they'll be reaching the refugees. But Bengali went first to plead his case to say he didn't see anything unusual about the churning rocks at all. Chitara has her turn to not only agree with Bengali, but she says that by now the refugees could be anywhere. Back with the Whiskers that Panthril, Lino, and the Thunderkins, what the Whisker did first is that it uses its whiskers to do some probing. But so far, nothing happened. But then the kittens just told Lionel that they've heard something. So Lionel said, "What's going on?" Whitey Cat, who's Whitey Kit's brother, said that he isn't sure, but there's a magnetic force field that's going around somewhere. Then Wiley Kid, who's Wiley Cat's sister, just told Lionel that whatever's going on, but the signal's coming from nearby. Short after Pantherl had located to where the signal was coming from, the Whisker's probes were retracted, so after that the Whisker heads off. Meanwhile, at the Caverns of Cold, the Thunderstrike that has Linkso, Chitara, and Bengali And of course, Linkso just told Chitara and Bengali that so far he found nothing in the caverns of cold, or so he thought. He was asking Bengali if he saw anything on his side, but Bengali said no. Then Linkso was asking Chitara if she saw anything on her side, but Chitara said no. Long story short, back with the Whisker with the Thunder Kittens, Lionel and Panthro. They spotted something alright, so when Lionel wanted to know what it is, but Panthro said that he isn't sure. But what Lionel, Panthro, and the Thunder Kittens didn't know, what they saw down below is Dome Down. Now remember, that was mentioned back in part 2. So what Dome Down did is that it attacked the Whisker with Lionel, the Thunder Kittens, and Panthro. So when that happened, Lionel says that he just couldn't hold on to the controls of the Whiskers anymore, and Panthro pleaded his case that what is going on is that they're in some kind of a gravitational field. This is what the Dome Down was firing at them. So what Panthro did is that he was trying to go to full power on the Whisker, but it was no use. The Thunderkins panicked and says, "Oh dear, we're gonna crash." "Now stay calm," Lionel said. "Don't panic." "We've gotten out more situations than this," Lionel said. But what the Whisker wasn't prepared for is that it's going inside Dome Down, so that's exactly what it did. Good news, the Whiskers survived intact. Also the good news is that Panthrol, the Thunderkins, and Lionel were not harmed in any way, but they saw where they are. They're inside Dome Down. Even though the Thundercats had no idea, but they just heard growling coming from nearby, and it's from Two Time. So what Two Time did is that he did the same thing as he did with the Thunderian refugees. He uses his power to flip the Thundercats upside down and on their heads. Two Time also did that he welcomed the Thundercats to Dome Down. So Lionel pleaded his case. He says, "Well, you got a strange way to welcome friends like this." So Two Time was more than happy to introduce himself. Tiny Cat goes first to tell Two Time that he doesn't care less about who he is. Then his sister demanded Two Time to let them down this minute. Then Two Time has his turn to plead his case. He said that he doesn't think that the Thundercats understand the thing because he said that he's the one that's giving orders. In other words, in Two Times' case, he said that the Thundercats are the ones that are going to obey those orders. Long story short, as a matter of fact, things are looking bad for all four Thundercats until when Panthro has his turn to plead a case that it must be a joke somehow. But Lionel said, "I hate to break a bearer of bad news, but we don't have time to hang around here," he said. Back with Two Time, he was shocked because he was not prepared for what Lionel's going to do next. Well, he did what any good guy would do, blaze side down, of course. So what Lionel did is that he had projected a Thundercat signal from his sword, so he did. Back in the Thunderstrike with Chitara, Bengali, and Linkso, so by the time they heard the Thundercat signal, Chitara just told Linkso to change course, to take them to where the signal was coming from. So that's what the Thunderstrike did. Later, back at the Churning Rocks, remember Mumm-ra? He had just left his pyramid moments ago. So what he did is that he arrived at the Churning Rocks. On the Thunderstrike's way to where the Thundercat signal was coming from, and to help out Lionel, that's when Chitara saw Mumm-ra, who was there. But Mumm-ra is not alone because with him is his canine sidekick, Muhammad. So when Chitara told Linkso that she just saw Mumm-ra, but Linkso just dismissed her and said that's impossible. The reason why he said that is because remember Mumm-ra was exiled just 2 episodes ago, and they never seen him since before they left, just until now. Now Bengali saw him too, just as Chitara did, and he suspected what Chitara said was true. Linkso just told Bengali that their first priority is to help out Lionel first, so Bengali agrees with Linkso's suggestion and said that they'll deal with Mumm-ra later. So they head back to where the signal was coming from, the Thundercat signal, that is. Back with Mumm-ra and his sidekick, that's when Mumm-ra told his canine pal that for some reason the Thundercats must have suspected that they were there. So Mumm-ra has to come up with a plan quick, and he has to do it. So how, you may ask? Well, he did the same thing as he did twice, disguise himself as Jaga, so he did. Before heading off, he told his canine pal to wait here while he goes to persuade Jaga, just as he did back in part one, but failed. And then he said once that mission is finished, the Thundercats, as he says, will be a problem of both his and his canine pal's hands. So after that, he heads off. Meanwhile, back at Dome Down, while Lionel's friends, Chitara, Linkso, and Bengali are held up at the moment, in the meantime, Lionel goes one-on-one with Two Time. After Two Time demanded Lionel to hand over the sword, but Lionel refused, and so Lionel uses his sword power, so he did. For sure, after Two Time was knocked out at the moment, but he won't be for long. So Panthro still upside down on his head, and so were the rest of his friends. He told Lionel, "Not bad, but how are we gonna get out of here?" Remember Tor and his family that were held prisoners there? Well, Tor's the one to answer Lionel's question. He said that Two Times should be the one to help you out of this mess. He's the one that controls Stone Down, he said. Tor said the only way that he has any gravitational controls is with the button on his head. Well, Wily Kid and Wily Cat looked at each other and then agreed the fact that the Thundercats' good news had found Tor and his family, which are the Thunderian refugees. So Lionel was told by Wily Cat to use the sword power on the button on Two Times' head. So following that suggestion, that's what Lionel did. So when Lionel, after he pushed the button on Two Times' head, guess what Lionel and his friends did? They're no longer levitated and upside down on their heads. By the time that the Thundercats went to the refugees, they had no idea that Toontown just got up right behind them, and he told them that they just made a big mistake and was going to attack them. With Lionel's friends, the Thunderkins and Panther, by the time they saw Two-Time coming from behind, that's when Lionel knows what to do. He uses the sword power to attack Two-Time from behind. Long story short, after that battle between Lionel and Two-Time, Two-Time was defeated thanks to Lionel and his sword. And guess who showed up in the nick of time to see that? It's the Thunderstrike, and it has Linkso, Bengali, and Chitara. So not only did Panthro had pleaded his case to say how late they were, but better late than never in that case. That's when Lionel told the Thunderkins and Panthro to go ahead and free the Thunderian refugees while he'll have a chat with Linkso, Chitara, and Bengali. So the three of them agreed and did just that. Back with the Thunderkins, they went up to Tor and his family. And that's when the Thunderkins explained that how themselves and the Thundercats had been looking for them everywhere. And there are indeed the refugees that they've been looking for. And the kittens were more than happy to introduce themselves to Tor and his family. Now Tor was in shock. He says, "Wow, you look like the Thundercats, but only younger." "That's true," Wily Kid said. "We may be young, but you may want to step back. We'll get you out of here in no time." So that's exactly what the kittens did. Later in the Great Beneath, there's Jagara, and that's when she heard a voice of Jaga behind her. He said, "Is there a problem?" Now remember, this was Mumm-ra's third time he ever became Jaga, but still Jagara is not aware of this. Now remember, she had met him before. So deciding to think nothing of it, that's when Jagara says, "I'm so glad you're here." Then Mumm-ra, who was Jaga in disguise, had this little thought in his head. He said that the spell must be working more powerful than he thought, but he had no idea that just recently he had failed to persuade her. But thinking nothing of it, that's when the Fate Jogger decided to play along anyway. So he's asking Jagara what seemed to be the problem. So Jagara, in omission by confession, she said that earlier someone had tried to sabotage the gyroscope, and what's worst of all is that the regulator was missing. Jagara also said that she finds it really, really weird, and she couldn't figure out who would steal the regulator, what was going on, and why. Then Jagara also said that what's even weirder is that she doesn't remember a thing. So the fake Jaga asked her a question. "You don't remember the agreement we made earlier?" And she says, "No, nothing." Then the fake Jaga started pleading the case that what he told her what her mission was to get rid of the Thundercats, which he said were fake, or so she thought. Then he told her that her job was to sabotage the gyroscope to make sure that the Thundercats were done away with, that he said that were fake, and etc. And so, just like what Mumm-ra did twice before but failed, he finally puts Jagara under a trance again, this time for the second time. And so now that Jagara is under a trance for the second time, she now remembers what she was supposed to do, make sure that the Thundercats are done away with. Meanwhile, back on Dome Down, now that the Thunderian refugees are free thanks to the Thundercats, so Lionel went first to plead his case that the new Thunder that they're on right now is about as strange as they could get. Chitara, who agrees with him and said that he's not kidding, but not as strange as it's gonna be with what happens next, she said. By surprise, that's when Chitara just let slip to both Lionel and Panthro, and let's not forget the Thunderkins, that earlier herself and Bengali just saw Mumm-ra there at the Churning Rocks. And they both said, "Say what? Did you say Mumm-ra?" Bengali has his turn to plead a case. He said that he's not only just there moments ago, but let's not forget his canine pal. He's there too. And both himself and Chitara just saw him there at the Churning Rocks earlier. So Panthro has his turn to not only agree with Bengali in what he suspected, and so did Chitara. He's asking Lionel, "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" "Exactly what I was thinking," Lionel said. "It all makes sense, the earth tremors and everything else. And of course Mumm-ra himself. Yes, they should have seen this coming because it was all part of the plan." Then it's Tor's turn to plead his case. He says, "Excuse me for speaking out of turn, but don't you think we should be getting out of here while Two-Time over there is still unconscious at the moment?" Lionel agrees with Tor and told Chitara, Lingsu, and Bengali to take their new friends, the Thunderian refugees, to the new lair. And while they're doing that, the rest can handle Mumm-ra. So that's exactly what they did. Lionel, Panther, the Thunderkins are in the Whisker, and they had just arrived at the Churning Rocks. But no sooner by the time they arrived, Lionel senses that his sword just told him what was going on. So just like what any good guy would do, Lionel looked through his sword's eyes, so that's what he did. What Lionel saw was unbelievable. There's the gyroscope, the great beneath, Jagara, and along with Jaga? At first he had no idea, so he's asking the sword to investigate further. So it did, and what Lionel saw was unbelievable. Lionel should have known that that Jaga was a fake, but Jagara was not aware of it, and that he was really Mumm-ra in disguise. Back with Lionel, now that he knew the truth, he told Panther that there's a cavern inside the Churning Rocks somewhere, and that leads to the Great Beneath. So that's what Panther did and took everyone there. So, speaking of the Great Beneath, meanwhile there, now Jagara, who was under the trance earlier for the second time thanks to you know who, guess what she did? She sabotaged the gyroscope controls, but she had no idea. Of course, she was still unaware that that Jaga was a fake. It was really Mumm-ra in disguise. But then suddenly, who should appear out of nowhere? It's Lino and his sword, and they just appeared out of nowhere in the Great Beneath. Lino's not alone because guess who else is there? It's Panthro and the Thunderkins, and they surround the fake Jaga. And of course, Jagara would have seen them too, but she was mesmerized at the moment. So even though Jagara had no idea but wants to know who they are, well, the Fate Jaga was more to answer that and said that they're the imposters, the Fate Thundercats that he spoke about since back in part 1. So Lionel decided to tell Jagara, by the looks of things, I say that you're a Thundercat. Am I right? Before Jagara can answer Lionel's question, that's when the Fate Jaga started protesting to say those Thundercats are fake ones and etc. Back with Jagara, who was under a trance at the moment, she was confused. So back with Lionel, he tries to get to convince Jagara. He says, true, they may look like Jaga, but the real Jaga died, and that was really Mumm-ra in disguise, he said. Jagara was still confused over this, and that's when the fake Jaga started pleading his case to say he's the imposter, don't listen to him, and etc. So after that debate, it's now Panthero's turn to step up. So he told the fake Jaga, perhaps we should settle this. But the fake Jaga pleaded his case to say that he'll destroy him. But Panthro had to convince the fake Jaga otherwise to say, no, that's not exactly what the real Jaga said and how he should act. Then Panthro asked the fake Jaga a question. You are a Jaga, are you not? And so Panthro has his turn to introduce Jagara to Lino, the Thunder Kittens, and etc. So what Lionel did is that he handed Panthro his sword. And so Panthro introduced Jagara the sword of omens that Lionel has. That's the same sword as Jaga had. Back with Jagara, the moment she saw that sword, she remembered it really well. That snapped her out of the trance immediately. Back with Panthro, who has Lionel's sword, he not only told Jagara that that's indeed correct, but there is one thing that the sword cannot be used for is for evil purposes. So he told the fake Jaga this question: if you are who you claim to be, why don't you prove it? So then Pandro told the fake Jaga, if we are who you say we are, and if we are the fakes, and you're not, why don't you take the sword for yourself? After Jagara agrees with Pandro, of course. So the fake Jaga was going to take the sword, but then he hesitated. So the fake Jaga decided not to give it another thought and decided to grab the sword by the handle, but by the time that he did, the sword's power has forced the Fate Jugger to reveal himself, and is none other than you know who, Mumm-ra himself. So, unfortunately for Jagara, she should have realized all along that that Jaga was a fake, and that he had tried for the third time to persuade her to sabotage the gyroscope, and he's the one that took the regulator. And of course, now that he had failed for the third time, Mumm-ra that is, that's when she should have realized that it was all part of his plan. So now that Mumm-ra has been revealed in front of Jagara, this time for real, and that's when Mumm-ra pleaded his case to Lionel to say that there's no way that neither he or his friends could survive on New Thundera, or so he thinks. So when Panthro gives Lionel his sword back, so not only did Lionel get his sword back thanks to Panthro, and just when Mumm-ra was about to attack, that's when Lionel blocks the attack. So magically speaking, the battle between Lionel and Mumm-ra went on and on and on and on and on. That was until, thanks to Lionel's sword power, it went back to Mumm-ra, and by surprise, Mumm-ra went back to his mummified self again. Before Mumm-ra can leave, he pleaded his case with the Thundercats to say the battle is yours, but the war is far from over. Then by surprise, Mumm-ra just suddenly let slip to say, it is true, I do have the regulator because I took it earlier, and without it, the gyroscope cannot be controlled in any way. So yes, the Thundercats should have known, and so did Jagara. Then Mumm-ra said that it'll be a matter of time before the cat's lair itself, and of course New Thundera, will disintegrate just like what the old one did 3 seasons ago. And Mumm-ra has his last message to the Thundercats that you can rest assured of this, that I will survive and you won't. So you know what this means. New Thundera's in serious trouble unless the regulators return. But is what Mumm-ra said true? Well, good news for the Thundercats, they may have rescued the refugees, but New Thunder is going to get worse and worse. So that ends episode 3 in part 3.